Okay, this is your second English language IGCSE Revision session, and we're going to look at Game of Polo with a headless goat. So you might want to get your anthology out in front of you so you can make some notes. Let's read it through to start with. We drove off to find the best viewing spot, which turned out to be the crest of the hill, so we could see the approaching race. I asked the lads if we could join in the wacky races and follow the donkeys, and they loved the idea. We'll open the car boot, you climb inside and point your camera towards the race. As the donkeys overtake us, we'll join the cars. But will you try and get to the front? Oh yes, that's no problem. The two lads who had never been interested in this karate sport were suddenly fired up with enthusiasm. We waited for eternity on the brow of the hill, me perched in the boot with a zoom lens pointing out. Nearly 1 hour later, I was beginning to feel rather silly when the only action was a villager on a wobbly bicycle who nearly fell off as he cycled past and gazed around at us. Several vehicles went past and some donkey carts carrying spectators. Are they coming? We called out to them. Coming, coming, came the reply. I was beginning to lose faith in its happening, but the lads remained confident. Just as I was assuming that the race had been cancelled, we spotted two approaching donkey carts in front of a cloud of fumes and dust created by some 50 vehicles roaring up in their wake. As they drew nearer, Jakub revved up the engine and began to inch the car out of the lay-by. The two donkeys were almost dwarfed by their entourage, but there was no denying their speed. The Kibler donkey is said to achieve speeds of up to 40 kilometers per hour, and this looked close. The two were neck and neck, their jockeys perched on top of the tiny carts, using their whips energetically, although not cruelly. Okay, we're going to look at some of the kind of points that you could make about language and structure just on these first few paragraphs of the text. So, the first thing is, at the beginning, there's a sense of orientation. So what she's trying to do is just set the scene so that you can picture where you are. So when it says, which turned out to be the crest of the hill, you're starting to picture who's there and where you are. And that just sets the scene ready for the whole of the rest of the passage. This reference to the wacky races is like a reference to a cartoon. If you're not sure what is talking about, just go into YouTube and put in wacky races and you'll see it's kind of like this really chaotic, frantic, fast-paced, funny cartoon race. And so this little reference here is an attempt to create humour, okay, and talk about how chaotic and absurd the whole race is, okay? She uses direct speech here. So do you remember in the last session yesterday we were talking about the use of direct speech and how it makes it really engaging. So it kind of makes you feel as if you're there and you're listening to that conversation. So you can picture that conversation with the, in this case, the two people who are kind of like in charge of the car, okay? But you can imagine that you're there in that situation. So it makes it really immediate and real to you. We've then got, if we move on to the second paragraph, it says, the two lads who had never been interested in this karate sport were suddenly fired up with enthusiasm. We waited for an eternity on the brow of the hill. And this idea of waiting for eternity, it's obviously an exaggeration, isn't it? Okay, so that's hyperbole. So it's kind of using exaggeration for effect. So again, if you're writing about that, you pick out the technique, you pick out the quote, and then you say the effect. So you say, the writer uses hyperbole when she says, we waited for an eternity on the brow of the hill, in order to emphasize how long they were waiting and that they were frustrated and wondering whether the race was ever going to go past them. Okay, so you're picking up the technique, you're using a quote, and then you're explaining the effect. And that's what you need to do all the way through your question 4 answer. There's more of, there's a further kind of comic image later in this paragraph again then, when it says, nearly 1 hour later, I was beginning to feel rather silly when the only action was a villager on a wobbly bicycle who nearly fell off as he cycled past and gazed around at us. And obviously the idea of the villager looking at this strange person who's obviously a foreigner kind of perched in the boot, pointing her zoom lens out of the boot, wondering what on earth they're doing there. It's meant to be a comic image. And then the idea of him nearly falling off his bike as well is quite humorous, isn't it? So the whole of this paragraph is all about kind of creating a little bit of humor, really. And she creates that image in order to do it. There's then more creation of suspense. So you get several vehicles went past and some donkey carts carrying spectators. Are they coming? We called out to them. Coming, 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 reply. I was beginning to lose faith in its happening, but the lads remained confident. So again, she's making you wait. She's building up that suspense until you get to that moment where the race is going to start. As a reader, you know that's going to happen, but structurally, this is just building up that suspense until you get to that moment where the donkeys come past and then the race is really starting. We then get, in this last paragraph that we're looking at today, just as I was assuming that the race had been cancelled, we spotted 2 approaching donkey carts in front of a cloud of fumes and dust created by some 50 vehicles roaring in their wake. There's some quite interesting verbs in this bit. So the roaring is, I think, personification really. The idea of the vehicles roaring, like as if they're animals or people. And there's a lot of, I haven't jotted this down, but there's a lot of sensory description here as well. So with the roaring, and then, so that's what you can hear, isn't there? And in terms of what you can see, you've got this image of the cloud of fumes and dust. And I'm sure there was another reference to sound as well somewhere else. So here we are, yeah. Jakub revved up the engine. So she's using quite a lot of sensory description, again, to engage you and make you feel as if you're there in that moment, is what you'd say about that. The second part of this paragraph, it actually gives you a bit of information. We've got the idea that it's in Karachi, so it says it's a Karachi sport up here, doesn't it? And then down here, it actually starts talking about the donkey a little bit more. That was the donkeys that are used for these races. It says the Qibla donkey is said to achieve speeds of up to 40 kilometers an hour. And I think that's important because if you don't get that kind of factual information, then really it's just her telling a funny story or an interesting story or just describing it. And I think a lot of these texts in the anthology, they're about more than that. They're kind of travel writing, which is also trying to inform. So they're not just telling you funny stories, not just describing a place, but trying to give you some information about this country or this city or this experience, whatever it is, so that you feel as if you've actually found something out about this place or about the world in some way. And I think that's what this section of the paragraph is about. So the use of the factual information there kind of shows that she's not, it's to do with the purpose, isn't it? Because she's not just narrating, she's not just entertaining, she's not just describing, but she's also informing. So it's to do with what she's trying to achieve through the writing here. And then right at the end, we've got these adverbs that you could pick out. It says the 2 were neck and neck, their jockeys perched on top of the tiny carts. Incidentally, we've got this repetition of the word perched, haven't we? Because she was perched in the boot, and now they're perched on the donkeys. So you could pick out that verb being repeated, almost like to draw a comparison between the observer and the riders, the jockeys themselves as well, maybe. But down here, the adverbs energetically, although not cruelly. And I suppose it's kind of creating a sense of the frantic energy and action, and the chaos of the race with the energetically. The although not cruelly, why is that there? It's worth thinking about that, isn't it? I wonder whether it's something to do with the idea of not, she's witnessing this and she's writing about it. And she wants to maybe emphasize the idea that, this was a sport, but they were, the donkeys were going fast, but it's not cruel. This isn't abusive. She doesn't want you to respond to this by thinking, oh, poor donkeys, they're treated horrendously. I mean, obviously that's her opinion. You might know about donkey racing in Pakistan and have a different opinion about it. I don't know. But that's her opinion. What she's trying to do is she's trying to present this idea that, this isn't abusive on their part. So she's trying to get you to form an opinion about it that suggests, this is a valid competition. This is a valid form of entertainment. We don't need to condemn the people who were involved in it. And I think that's what this, the cruelly is about here at the end. So that gives you a few of the points that you can make about the beginning of this non-fiction text. If you want to look at some of the rest of it, then again, if you go onto my YouTube channel, then you can see there's another one on Game of Polo with a headless goat. And you can get some more points about structure and about language that you could use if you're writing about this text for question 4 in the exam.